Hey, what's up, Defenders? Welcome to the second episode in our 8-part series where we are going through the best explanation of blank. This is a 8-week series where every week we're going through a classical argument that God is the best explanation of blank. Last week we talked about how God is the best explanation of why there is something rather than nothing. This week we're going to be talking about why God is the best explanation for the origin of the universe. Before I dive right in, I want to give you guys a couple quick updates. First and foremost, this is the second week that this YouTube channel has existed, but the Defenders Academy has existed for years. And we've traditionally existed inside a private platform that is still available for you to join. You can join it for free. It's a Christian-only community. And the links are in the description for you. There's a lot of trainings that we've had over the years that are like this that are not on YouTube. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is every single Wednesday we're going to have a new training coming out that is brand new for the platform for the next 8 weeks. It's the series that we just talked about. And throughout the rest of the week, we're going to be having other videos drop as I transfer them over from our old platform to YouTube. So wherever you're at, if you are interested in learning the 8-week series that we're going through right now, or just seeing all of the other incredible apologetics, theology-based content that we've put out over the years, you definitely want to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now, the other thing that I wanted to let you guys know right before we get into it is that the Defenders Academy exists primarily so that people can have a stronger foundation for their faith, so that they can know the evidence, they can know the argumentation, they can have conversations with non-believers and help to advance God's kingdom. If that's a cause that you care about and you're interested in, then I'd invite you to check out our Patreon, to prayerfully consider supporting us financially or just with prayer, because everything that we're doing is 100% based on people like you who want to support what we're doing. And if we don't have support from people like you, we aren't going to be able to do this for very long. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get right into today's lesson, the origin of the universe. Now, this is, can we see my mouse? Hopefully we can see my mouse. This is an argument that has been popularized by this gentleman here, William Lane Craig, and it is the Kalam Cosmological argument. It goes, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Now, I'm going to show you the Kalam Cosmological argument, the logical structure. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Just like we did last week, before we talk about how true those premises are, let's have a conversation about the logical structure of this argument. This argument is a deductive argument where the conclusion follows by necessity from these two premises. So let's pretend, whether or not they are, just for the moment, let's pretend that both of these statements are true. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist. What is the necessary conclusion from those two statements together? Therefore, the universe has a cause. This is the entirety of the Kalam cosmological argument in its logical form. Once we get to the conclusion, we're going to be having a conversation about what it means to be a cause of the universe. But first, let's have a conversation about these two premises. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Let's think about this. A defense of premise 1 is kind of an odd thing to give considering how obvious premise 1 is. Very few people ever actually try to refute this until they see how strong premise 2 actually is. Then you'll see that a lot of popular atheists actually go back and attack premise 1. But nobody ever attacked it until premise 2 was proven. So, let's first off consider the negation. Let's consider what would happen if the negation were true. If not that whatever begins to exist has a cause, but that things can begin to exist without a cause. What would that mean? That would mean that in our experiential life, there would be no explanation for why there wasn't a horse in your bathroom right now, why there's not a tire iron on your balcony, why there's not a ham sandwich in your mouth. If things could begin to exist without a cause, it would be completely inexplicable as to why that doesn't happen all the time. In fact, this very premise, if the negation of this premise were true, then the entire field of scientific study would be 100% pointless. If things could begin to exist without a cause, and science really is trying to figure out why things happen, well, we know that the answer is that things can happen for no reason at all. So scientific study would become completely impossible if things could begin to exist without a cause. Let's also consider the laws of physics. We know that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. We know that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, which means that anything that just popped into existence without a cause would break the laws of physics, given that matter would materialize out of nothing, or energy would materialize out of nothing. So it would actually break the laws of physics for premise 1 to be false. And then let's also just consider our experience. In our experience, we recognize that the law of causality holds universally. There's nothing that we have ever experienced that contradicts the idea that whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, one of the ways that people have been trying to argue against premise 1 in recent times has been by an appeal to quantum mechanics. They will point out that when you look at very small particles, subatomic particles, it does seem to be that things just pop into existence out of nothing, and we don't know any cause of it. However, that is actually conflating multiple concepts. On one hand, they aren't understanding what the concept of without a cause is. It's not the case that these subatomic particles are coming into existence out of nothing. That's not what's happening on the quantum field. The quantum field is actually this rich energy field that is definitely not nothing. Another thing to realize is that we have roughly 10 different interpretations of quantum mechanics currently that all seem at least reasonably plausible, and nobody knows which one is right. Some of them are deterministic, some of them are causal, some of them are not. However, it is not fair to say, in our current understanding of quantum mechanics, which is admittedly very, very slim, that things pop into existence without a cause, even on a quantum level. When people say that, they are simply arguing from ignorance. They are actually doing a science of the gaps argument. They're arguing that because we can't explain it, therefore science. So we realize that there actually is no experience that we have ever had in our lifetimes that contradicts the premise that whatever begins to exist has a cause. In fact, if there were, it would actually break the laws of physics, and the negation actually completely destroys the ability to do science. So premise 1 goes widely unargued and uncontested. It is the strongest premise in almost any logical argument that I've ever seen for almost anything. This is a self-evident premise. Let's look at premise 2. The universe began to exist. So, a defense of premise 2. First, we're going to talk about this as a logical conversation, and then we're going to talk about the scientific evidence. So when we're talking about the logical conversation, let's consider the concept of an infinite regress. Now, an infinite regress is the idea of things going back in time forever. So you can imagine like a series of dominoes. You hit a domino and the next one falls, the next one falls, the next one falls. Now, it's the case that there has to be a first domino. The first domino has to be pushed for the chain to start. You can't actually say that there's an infinite number of dominoes in the past. And so what this gets at is the idea that you can't actually traverse an infinite number of things. Or to say differently, successive addition doesn't get you to infinity. So if I were to start counting at 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm doing successive addition. I'm adding 1 each time, right? Well, it's actually impossible for successive addition to get to infinity because you can always add 1 more. And infinity is the concept of, well, the infinite. It's the concept of the end of an endless line. So what's that have to do with why the universe had to begin to exist? Well, because the universe entails time. Time is one of the fundamental building blocks of the universe. So, and it happens to be the case that time is best defined as an interaction of objects upon each other. So, when objects interact upon each other, then in a singular moment, we have what we could consider a unit, a moment unit. And we actually traverse through time. This is an A theory of time, I'll admit. We actually traverse through time in the form of successive addition. And so what happens is that every single moment objects are interacting upon each other, and that interaction is the current moment, and then time moves forward by the adding of a moment onto a collection of past moments. That collection of past moments is the past, the current moment is the present, and the causal reality that we recognize and how it affects the future is how we can consider future moments. So but we couldn't get, just like I can't get from 0 to infinity, we couldn't get from negative infinity to 0 by counting. In fact, the very absurdity that I have just outlined is the precise absurdity that one faces when arguing that time had no beginning. If we are to say that time has no beginning, then we are to argue both that there is no start point and that we somehow traveled to this point in time from the start of it. by way of analogy, we could consider a hallway. Consider that you find yourself in a hallway, and you look down, and the hallway has no unique markings anywhere. There's no doors, there's no ornate fixtures, there's no design. It is this sleek hallway with no individuality anywhere, and it goes infinitely in both directions. Now, you find yourself in this hallway, and you think, well, there's nothing for me to do but to walk, so you start walking. And then consider that as you're walking down this hallway, suddenly somebody taps you on the shoulder. You look at them and you're, whoa, where did you come from? You know there's no doors. There's no way they could have just gotten in. And you didn't know that anybody else was in the hallway. Where did you come from? And they say, I came from the beginning. You go, okay, so I went the wrong way then. If I actually walked that way, there's a beginning to the hallway. Oh, no. You'll never reach the beginning of the hallway. Why not? Because you were right that the hallway goes on infinitely. But you just said you came here from the beginning. Oh, I did. That's the logical absurdity. Yeah, like, of course you don't believe this person. Something's seriously wrong with them. That's the logical absurdity that we face when we argue that time is infinite in the past. There's an there's an infinite past. So because there is not an infinite past, that also then necessarily follows that there is not an infinite universe. The universe did not exist infinitely into the past because the past is not eternal. There's not an eternal past. Therefore, logically, the universe must have a beginning. And this is actually the argument that was given for a very, very long time, because the traditional stance was that theists argue for a beginning of time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then the traditional stance is that atheists argue that the universe is eternal. And so this was the logical argument that's been constructed and given for a very, very long time. But in recent history, we've actually found dramatic scientific evidence to defend this premise as well. So, a defense of the premise scientifically. In the 1920s, Edwin Powell Hubble observed redshift when he was looking at distant galaxies. And so I'm going to give you the definition of redshift here. Displacement of the spectrum of an astronomical object toward longer red wavelengths. It is attributed to the Doppler effect, a change in wavelength that results when a given source of waves and an observer are in motion with respect to each other. So what Edwin Hubble was able to observe is, by measuring this redshift, he was able to figure out, one, that that galaxies are moving away from us. Two, the further away a galaxy is from us, the faster it's moving. So what he was able to do with that was realize, and this is the big discovery that Edwin Hubble had, the universe is expanding. This is a big deal. Now, if you were to do the arithmetic, and you were to simply go backwards and extrapolate backwards, what we find is that all these galaxies move into one central point. So when you run the time backwards, you run the arithmetic backwards, we see that everything collapses into this singular point of infinite density. And so this is the singularity point. This is where the universe began. And the explosion occurred. And now you could argue that it's not actually appropriate to do that kind of arithmetic to get an estimate for how old the universe is and say you can't extrapolate data past the known variables. And, well, that was actually some of the heat that Alexander Friedman and George Lemaitre got when they first developed this theory, because the theory that I'm talking about is the Big Bang theory. So it was postulated in the 40s. And then in 1948, Ralph Alfvén predicted that if such an event as the Big Bang Theory had actually taken place, then there would be a measurable amount of cosmic microwave background radiation present throughout the universe today. He said if that was true, if you could extrapolate backwards and that's an appropriate thing to do, then what you'd be able to find is cosmic microwave background radiation. It would be everywhere in the universe. We'd be able to measure it. Well, in 1965, this cosmic microwave background radiation was first observed. And today, we know its temperature to be 2.75 degrees above absolute zero. Now, the crazy thing about that is when we think about the size of the explosion that we're talking about, we can use that temperature and we can figure out how long it's been cooling from the explosion. And we can actually reason backwards with this as well. And when we do that, we get a corroborative argument because in both cases, Because in both cases, we get the universe to be about 13.7 billion years old. So we actually have corroborative evidence that the universe started 13.7 billion years ago in the Big Bang Theory. Now, this is crazy too. The universe is expanding. This much we know. Edwin Powell showed it. So in 2003, Arvid Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin published a paper titled Inflammatory Spacetimes Are Not Past Complete, where they proved that any universe that has on average been expanding throughout its history cannot be infinite in the past, but must have a past spacetime boundary. So what does that mean? They proved in 2003, the Bord-Guth-Vilenkin theorem proved that any universe that has on average been expanding must have a beginning. And the cool thing about this theorem, because of its nature and its structure, it's completely independent of the early state of the universe. So, rebuttal that people will often give to this kind of an argumentation is that we still don't have a quantum theory of gravity. We still don't know what happened in the first 10 to the negative 43 seconds of the universe because we don't have a quantum theory of gravity. So the first split second of reality. But the Bord-Guth-Vilenkin theorem is completely independent of that. It doesn't matter what the early conditions of the universe was. It doesn't matter what our fundamental constants values are. It doesn't matter how gravity works, even though we don't have a quantum theory of gravity yet. Regardless, if on average the universe has been expanding, which we've shown that it has, then the universe has to have had a beginning. So I can give the argument for the beginning of the universe as follows. I'm going to put this in a logical structure for you. A defense of the premise, a defense of the science that I just argued to defend premise 2. Okay, premise 1. Any universe that has, on average, been expanding throughout its history must have a beginning. This was proved by the Bord-Guth-Vilenkin theorem in 2003. Premise 2. Our universe is one that has, on average, been expanding throughout its history. This was proved by Hubble's law in 1929. There's a typo there. There's an extra 9. Conclusion, our universe must have a beginning. So we can defend premise 2, that the universe must have a beginning. Premise 1 is self-evident. The conclusion follows by necessity. The universe has a cause. So that necessarily, we should automatically see that and then have the question, okay, but what does it mean to be a cause of the universe? So let's consider this. Now we're going to consider this deductively as well. We're going to say that which is necessary. So to answer this question, the first question that we should probably ask is, what does it mean to be the universe? What are the fundamental building blocks of the universe? Well, according to the Bord-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, it's the assessment of the Big Bang Theory. George Lemaitre, this was the way the theory was constructed. There are 4 fundamental components that all came into existence at the singularity event of the Big Bang. Time, matter, space, energy. So from that, we can already get quite a bit of information about what it means to be a cause of the universe. First off, if time did not yet exist when the cause of the universe caused the universe, then the cause of the universe necessarily must be timeless. It exists outside of time. Second, if the cause of the universe created matter, caused matter, before matter existed, because matter came into existence at the singularity point, then the cause of the universe must be immaterial. Third, if it caused space, there was no space prior to the existence of the universe, then it must be space transcendent. And fourth, if it caused energy, and there was no energy the way that we calculate it prior to the existence of the universe. I'm going to use this word almost as a placeholder, but I'm going to say, then this cause must be powerful. Now, that's a little bit. We can say that this is timeless, immaterial, space transcendent, and powerful. Now, there's a couple things that fit into this category. You could say things like an unembodied mind, something that we would consider God to be. You could say things like abstract objects like numbers or mathematical rules. You could say maybe even laws of logic could exist in this space. I think laws of logic are timeless, immaterial, space transcendent, and powerful. This cause of the universe, we haven't yet gotten to God, but we've gotten to a small list of things that includes God. But we're not done. There's more that we can say based on what we know. So we can say that this cause must be uncaused. Why? Because there must be a first cause. As we talked about, you have to have a first domino. And, I wonder if I wrote this, It's a consequence of this cause being timeless. See, there must be a first cause. How do we know that the first cause is the cause that caused the universe? Because it was timeless. And if time is a type A theory, A theory version of time, if time did not yet exist, and if time is definitionally an interaction of objects upon each other, then nothing else could have happened. There was, prior to the creation of the universe, there was no interaction of any objects of any form. So there was not another cause that caused the cause of the universe, because that would necessitate the use of time, which does not yet exist. So the cause of the universe is itself uncaused. Okay? We can say more, though. We can say that it was changeless. At least prior to creation of the universe, it's changeless. This cause could have changed since the creation of the universe, but it could not have changed prior to the creation of the universe, because again, change necessitates time. We're not done. We can actually say more, and this is probably the biggest one. Consider the following conundrum. These are things that I've just laid out as to how they are necessarily the case. The cause of the universe is itself uncaused and timeless. However, the universe was caused 13.7 billion years ago. If the cause of the universe is uncaused and timeless, then a question arises as to why the universe is only 13.7 billion years old. This seems to be a contradiction of the laws of causality, namely that when necessary and sufficient conditions are met, an event occurs. So let's consider this. Imagine you have a gun, and imagine the gun is properly constructed, perfectly well-functioning gun. It has a firing pin in it, everything's appropriate for it. It has a properly functioning bullet chambered. Okay? Why has the gun not yet fired? If we have these necessary conditions, we have the bullet, we have the functioning gun, we have gunpowder, we have a firing pin, why has the gun not yet fired the bullet? Well, because we're missing a sufficient condition to pull the trigger, right? So it's the case that guns don't just fire themselves. Somebody has to choose to pull the trigger. This is the same exact explanation that we can give. It's actually the only possible explanation as to why the universe was created a finite time ago by a timeless cause. It's because, out of necessity, the cause must have had the ability to choose to create the universe. If all other conditions are met, but we lack a sufficient one, then the sufficient one, because nothing can interact with this cause, must come from the cause. Meaning it's a choice. And if it's a choice, that means that this cause is conscious. So let's do a quick recap on what we have figured out must be true about the cause of the universe. It must be timeless. It must be immaterial. It must be space transcendent. It must be powerful. It must be uncaused. It must be changeless. It must be conscious. And this is obviously, when you lay it out, what everybody means when they say God. So that's what we have. The universe, the best explanation for the universe existing, for the cause of the universe, is that God created the universe. In fact, God is the only possible explanation that fits all of the necessary criteria that we have shown to be absolutely necessary for the universe to begin to exist. That's what I have for you guys this week. I'll see you next week. Hey guys, Devin Tracy here. I wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching that whole video. I know because you watched such a long video that it means that you're actually interested in the type of things that we're doing inside the Defenders Academy. And because that's true, I want to invite you to do a couple things. Actually, I got 3 things for you to prayerfully consider doing. First and foremost, I want you to go ahead and subscribe on YouTube so that you can be notified for all the amazing content that we continue to put out every single week. Go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave some comments. Second thing I want to invite you to do is honestly and earnestly, prayerfully consider supporting us on Patreon. You can go ahead and make a custom pledge for as little as $3 a month, or you can pick one of our tiers and get some of the cool bonuses that include some pretty cool merch. I'll let you guys look at that and decide what makes the best sense for you. And the third thing I want you to consider doing is, if you really love everything about the apologetics conversation and you wish you could have it more, we have a platform for you. It's our own private platform. It looks and operates a lot like a social media but it's specifically designed for Christians who want to sharpen themselves as better tools for the advancement of God's kingdom, and you are invited to that. Links in the description. I want to invite you to prayerfully consider supporting us in these ways. You could help our mission of spreading the gospel, our mission of helping people build a stronger foundation for their faith, and educating and training people to have these kind of conversations with non-believers in a hostile environment. If that's something that you have a heart for, that's what our heart's for, and I would invite you to prayerfully consider supporting us in any or even all of the 3 ways that I just mentioned. Love you guys. God bless.